The lights are kind of bright. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Scott Miller, staff writer for Supply Side Food and Beverage Journal. And welcome to Upcycle Your Way to Innovation, Mastering Functionality with Advanced Techniques. Some sources suggest that as much as 66 million tons of food goes to waste in the US every year. This is a critical gap in our food system that contributes not only to food insecurity, but also to climate change, with wasted food causing more than half of greenhouse gas emissions from landfills. But there are some people out there making a difference by taking food that would otherwise go to waste and giving it a new nutritional purpose. In this session, we'll dive into the science behind this practice called upcycling by breaking down advanced techniques and technologies. These methods are not just about reducing food waste. They're about unlocking the hidden potential of surplus food to create innovative and nutritious new products. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Just making sure. As we navigate this upcycling journey, we'll explore how enzymatic processes and fermentation can transform unused food into high-quality ingredients, how these upcycled ingredients enhance texture, flavor, and nutritional profiles, helping you create products that not only taste good, but also do good. And the growing consumer interest in sustainability and how upcycled ingredients can meet market demands while supporting environmental stewardship. Joining us today are two pioneers in the field of sustainable food innovation. First, we have Dr. Lara Ramden, who's at the forefront of integrating upcycling practices into mainstream food production. Her work in transforming underutilized ingredients into nutrient-rich products is paving the way for a sustainable future in food security and nutrition. We also have Delisa Harper, co-founder and CEO of Funky Mellow, which brings a unique blend of marketing savvy and culinary innovation to the table. Her company's creative use of chickpeas to make marshmallow cream is a brilliant example of upcycling in action, demonstrating that sustainability can be achieved deliciously. Now let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to just go to each of the panelists and ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what brings you here today.
So I have worked in upcycling and sustainability for about 7 years now. My journey started when I worked for Molson Coors Beverages Company, and we had a lot of grain left over from the beer making process, and we didn't know what to do with it. And we had a waste to worth program, and I ended up carrying that on when I went to work for Dole. We had a no fruit left behind program. Believe it or not, one of the biggest waste problems in the world is waste bananas, and bananas get rejected before they even make it onto a truck because of how they look. Because the quality controls for bananas are quite stringent, because when they get to the retailer, then they get rejected there if they've got black spots on them. So Dole had a big banana waste problem, so we set up an upcycling unit called Dole Specialty Ingredients, which makes green banana powder and what have you. And then I went to work for Upcycle Food Inc. for a couple of years, working on upcycled ingredients. And now I work for FoodX Climate, which is a not-for-profit, which is really interested in generating a movement which brings together people who are working on food and climate. You alluded to it, but food waste is a really significant problem. But food in general has more of an impact when it comes to climate than people want to acknowledge or realize. And when you go to different conferences, you either go to a food conference or you go to a climate conference, and rarely do the two disciplines meet. And actually, FoodX Climate has been set up to try and serve that purpose, to actually bring people together to talk about it more often. So I'm there now building out the LA chapter and also building out the scientific program.
Fantastic, thank you. Delisa?
Well, I will keep it short and sweet. My name is Delisa. I am from Austin, Texas, and I really have no food background whatsoever. I'm just a foodie at heart, and I do have dietary restrictions, so I'm vegan, I'm gluten-free, all the food allergies. We actually started Funky Mellow because my husband and we did have food allergies. And we wanted to create something that was very fun, also very nostalgic, and tastier than the original. So we ended up delving down the path of marshmallow things. We did crispy treats, we did marshmallows, and then we eventually did a cream. So the cream is a sample over there if you guys want to try it out. It is made from upcycled chickpea water. And before that, we discovered chickpea water because we were just wanting to be creative in the kitchen, find something that didn't have animal products in there, and it just happened to kind of, align with minimizing food waste. So we're very proud of the product. But before all that, I actually worked in the tech industry. I worked in the software industry, actually doing like corporate marketing. So I do have a marketing background. I got to school, did an MBA, a BBA in marketing, and I think I just eventually found a passion for food and landed in this industry. So I'm very happy to be here versus just regular tech.
Shout out to Delisa's mum and dad and
Yeah,
granny
they're
over
here.
there.
Oh, awesome.
So
Hello.
the Funky Mellow crew are in the house.
That's great.
Thank you.
I'm so
Yes,
glad.
they're here.
Yes, and we do have samples, so feel free to try out the product. It is delicious. So, for members of the audience who might not know, can you just describe the practice of upcycling, like what it entails, and does it include any techniques and technologies that we might not expect?
I mean, upcycling always requires a process of some kind, whether that be drying, whether that be milling, whether that be grinding, whether that be enzymatic hydrolysis, whether that be fermentation. There's always some kind of process. On a very basic level, let's take spent grain, for example. Spent grain is wet, and so it has to be dried pretty quickly in order for it to be safe for human consumption. And the processing and the labor and the resources needed to create these upcycled ingredients is really what contributes to the slightly higher cost, and which wouldn't be an issue, is one of the challenges of adoption of upcycling, but wouldn't be an issue if we had acceleration at scale. But there's a wide range of processes that you need to use in order to generate upcycled ingredients, because it's coming from a byproduct, it's coming from a waste stream, it's coming from fruits and vegetables at the farm level, which have been left over. There's always some kind of process that's needed in order to upcycle.
Fantastic. Delisa, do you have thoughts on that answer?
Yeah, so we actually get it's called aquafaba, which is chickpea water. If you go in a store and you get a can of chickpeas, it's that water that's left over, aside from the bean, aquafaba. So we actually have sourced a vendor to get aquafaba from, so we don't have to deal with the chickpeas. I know that's one of the questions, is what do you do with all the chickpeas you do? Yeah, we don't have to, although we do have some ideas on how to create like a chickpea cookie dough in the future, which is
That
super
sounds
exciting.
good. It's super nutritious as well.
Exactly, lots of protein. But I know that the vendor that we deal with, they do go through like a proprietary like double boiling of the aquafaba to make sure they kill any bacteria. They have it in a seal type bag, and we get it on a cold truck. So
all of that costs money, obviously.
all of it costs money.
Yeah,
Luckily,
exactly.
it's not a part of our process, because I know it gets very involved, but they do what they have to do to make sure it's safe for consumption.
So you both brought up cost and how that can affect the process of upcycling. So what does that mean for a brand looking to upcycle, and how can they mitigate those costs? I know you mentioned one possible solution, but I'd like to hear more about them.
I mean, we both work or have worked for upcycled brands, which means that if you compare that ingredient and or product to existing ingredients on products, there's always going to be a slight premium. So you're always, and in the upcycle category, whether that be banana chips or Voyage Foods chocolate spread or Matriarch Foods vegetable stew or tomato sauce, which are all upcycle certified products and made with upcycled ingredients, because of the nature of how they're made, they're always going to be at a slight premium. But if we get a wider adoption, because all of these are commercials, right? So all of these are commercial, and you can find them in the marketplace. What the movement needs, what Delisa needs, what all these brands needs is scale, right? And so they need volume. And as soon as we get scale and volume, then the price will go down, right? So we need greater adoption. We need more partnerships with more retailers to take on upcycled products and upcycled ingredients. We also need more food system designers to be experimenting and learning how to formulate with aquafaba the way in which Delisa did, but also with other upcycled ingredients like spent grain flour or upcycled vegetable and fruit powders or whatever it is. We need more formulators to be experimenting with those things. So we need all the different enablers in order to bring the cost down, basically.
Delisa, as someone who's been working in this space, what are your thoughts on that, on the cost dilemma?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the aquafaba is one of the higher cost goods that are in our recipe. Aside from, we do use a vegan cane sugar because we are a vegan product, as well as a tapioca syrup because we want to stay away from corn syrup and make it very allergen friendly. But yeah, I mean, as Dr. Lara said, like that is the price we pay to give a high premium product out there. Just because we don't want to be a part of the toxicity of the food supply that is currently out there. Any way that we can continue to bring joy to people and having something nostalgic in a way that doesn't really hurt their gut, which is kind of the whole reason why we started our brand, was to bring something tastier, but also in a way where they wouldn't miss the alternative product, the traditional product. And in a way, it's kind of educating people that like there's a better alternative out there anyway. And it's doing something great for the food supply.
That's awesome. So what would you say to a brand that maybe looks at some of these hurdles to getting into upcycling and is skeptical? Because I know, Lara, you said that being able to scale means getting everyone on board, right? So what does that look like when you're dealing with skepticism?
I don't think any of us are in food because we only want to make food for a certain subsection of society that can afford it, right? We're in food because we want to feed people, and I I come from a family, an Irish mother and a Mauritian father, and both cultures, although very different, are predicated on feeding people and feeling good about providing food for people. So I feel it's in my blood to make sure that everybody is fed. And then it's not some people haves and have-nots. So I think that I believe we're all intentionally trying to create democratic access to food, but also good food. And not just any kind of food, but good food. So fiber, protein, micronutrients, all those things. So it doesn't work if it's just me and Delisa doing it, right? Not that it's just me and Delisa, but in principle, the whole system needs to work together. So it starts with formulation designers having access to a wider range of ingredients. So that starts with procurement, right? And then maybe even starts before that. Maybe it starts with policy, and it probably in the future you have some kind of tax relief or tax incentive where if you're using ingredients or you can demonstrate reutilization of materials, you get some kind of tax relief. That's the only way I can see that happening. Then a formulation designer needs to work differently with upcycled ingredients because upcycled ingredients maybe taste a little different, look a little different because they're coming from waste. And then a retailer then needs to give a truly sustainable food product a bit of a break on listing prices, because if you're a small brand, I'm sure this resonates with you, if you're a small brand, listing prices can really hurt the success of a food product or not. So we need all the different parties to be working together.
Everything she said, absolutely. I couldn't have said any better.
Great. So I know that there are some, you mentioned the challenges that we face in making sure that less food is going to waste through these practices. But what do you think, we all know that upcycled sounds very close to recycled, right? And so in the public view, I've encountered companies that have a great upcycling story, but they don't put it on any of their marketing materials. So why do you think that is, and what can we do to reshape consumer perceptions around this?
I think that the storytelling around upcycling continues to evolve. It's not going away, right? The upcycling category continues to grow, but the way in which we talk about it is changing all the time. When I first started in upcycling, I think we were very intentional about talking about the fact that we were reutilizing waste. And I think slowly but surely that has evolved, certainly from my perspective, has evolved more into rescuing nutrition and really focusing on the repurposing of the nutrition. So if you work in spent grain, for example, a spent grain flour is mostly fiber and protein. So if you can focus on the rescuing the fiber and protein, that becomes a completely different story. And recycling, the word recycling, obviously people know mostly from plastic, right? And so they accept it from plastic, but they certainly don't want recycling on their food product, right? And the reason why we want to differentiate, because I also am on the board of the Upcycle Food Association, and we've worked really hard to have standards and guidelines of what upcycling really is. And the definition of upcycling is elevating that food and or ingredient to its highest and best use. So feeding people and providing good nutrition is really the highest and best use, right?
Delisa, I saw you nodding. So what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a good point. Like our brand is, I'd say, technically 7 years old, but like we became an LLC in 2020. So like this whole retail game it's relatively new, 4 years old. And our story did change. We didn't start as an upcycled brand. It was really just creating something that was allergen free. And along the way, as you heard, like I was pivoting through different products. We ran into aquafaba because we've always wanted to create a marshmallow fluff. And we've always loved fluff more than like your typical marshmallow because it didn't get solid, it wasn't super chewy, like it's more versatile, on and on. So when we were doing our research about aquafaba and just the fact that it is typically discarded, we actually focused more on the fact that we had like a waste problem. And being able to actually from our roots go to restaurants before we even had a vendor of aquafaba. We didn't even know that there was like a vendor for it. We used to go to restaurants and ask them for their upcycled aquafaba because we had to test for it. They were going to throw it away anyway. It was a very easy way to obtain a product that we needed to test and play with before actually creating something that we could take to retail.
So that sounds, you said it was easy, but it sounds laborious, right? Like having to go to individual.
Well, on that level, yes. It wasn't a scalable process,
right.
But it didn't cost us anything.
Okay.
That's what I mean by it. We didn't have to really source. We did have a list of restaurants that would continue to give us aquafaba on the side. But then once we sort of broke off and we realized that we do need to scale our process and we have to get something that is more feasible, then that's when we eventually saw that there's a whole world of people that vended aquafaba.
So what would you recommend for new brands that are trying to kind of break into this practice?
I mean, I would say just kind of naturally, for me and my husband, what we did was we just really created something that was true for us. And then do your research about the ingredients that you need for your product and see if there is any way to connect it to sustainability. I think unless you already have a strong connection to sustainability, you want to really make sure that your story resonates with you before you start telling it. A lot of people, I think, create possibly a fluffy story because they want it to seem like bigger and better. But you have to be very authentic when you're creating a brand. And so don't go too far ahead. You can always wrap in the community type story in there, but just stay true is what my main advice would be.
Also, you had food allergies, right? So you
I
were
had
driven
food
by
allergies, yeah.
you were looking for knowledge. You were already fairly knowledgeable based on your own experience, and I think that also helps. There's another lady who's a member of the Upcycle Food Association. She has a cake mix brand called Bake Me Healthy, And she also, like you, had another job. I think she was a banker. And Kimberly Lau is the founder's name, and she has made this cake mix because she wanted a clean label cake mix, because she and her family, like you and your husband, had food intolerances, and so she was driven by a thirst for her own knowledge, just like you.
Yeah, you can start by, I guess, a story on a micro level and see just how it impacts your health, your family, the people around you. And then I'm sure you can tie it into a macro level, like what it's doing for the environment, overall minimizing waste, all of that. So
That's
we
a great
also
point.
have the Upcycle Food Association, by the way, which you can join, Delisa, and that has a whole bunch of resources as well, not only, but as well as a community of other ingredient suppliers, if you're interested, specifically in the upcycled world. I have to say that.
Fantastic. So you basically, it sounds like you're talking about making good products in a good way, right? You're focusing on, like you said, the micro and then the macro. So what does formulation look like with these kinds of ingredients when you're taking an ingredient from an unconventional source and trying to fit it into either an existing product or create a new product? What does that look like?
a lot of trial and error, a lot of sleepless nights, but it's, I think actually, if I were being honest, we stumbled across this recipe by mistake because it actually was going to be a macaroon filling. It started as a macaroon filling, and we just decided to kind of tweak it, and eventually it turned into what it is today. So like I mentioned, we don't really have like a food background. So like you have to embrace the whole trial and error process and then involve the people around you to try it out, give honest feedback. But there's so many resources out there. There's so many knowledgeable people just to give you a starting point. And then you have to take the time to really flesh it out and make sure it fits whatever you're trying to create.
Can you name some of those resources? Or is that, I put you on the spot, sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, the resources were pretty much the people around us,
Okay.
mainly. Like we early on in our business, we joined a few like CPG organizations, and we had some mentors. We actually had one mentor that was in General Mills, and she was a part of the investment side. And she had access to like a breadth of people who were able to give us feedback on our product. So I would say like the most valuable resource has been people. And to get access to those people, we joined the like Startup CPG, we joined Naturally Austin or Naturally Network, SKU, we went through an accelerator program, we went through another one after that. So we tried to get access to as many people as possible so that we could get the feedback and the guidance from the people that had knowledge in the industry.
So it sounds like leveraging your network was
Absolutely.
and I've heard that a lot when it comes to upcycled products. It's all about finding the gaps in the food system where you can kind of, take something and use it. Dr. Lara, what do you think about that idea of building relationships for upcycling?
Yeah, no, I would have definitely suggested the Naturally Network. The Naturally has a booth here, by the way, just down there, I think. If you're not a member, there's one in most cities, I would say, right? There's one in LA, one in New York, one in the Bay Area. So that's a good place to start. And definitely Startup CPG is another good place to hang. They have a Slack channel with about 15,000 members in it. And
Wow.
man, it's a lot. I've had to mute it because there's just too much stuff going on. But there are all sorts of resources and mentors and people like me in there who will give you advice on product development and R&D if you want it. The Upcycle Food Association also has a community. We also have a Slack channel where you can just post, I need aquafaba. If you needed it, then the community would help you find it. Or I've got excess chickpeas I don't know what to do with. That's another thing we get a lot as well.
I'm there.
Yeah. And I would say definitely the power of, in these particular instances, the power of your network is really important. So yeah, just finding people who will connect you to other people is also part and parcel of the game, right? Yeah.
Great. So are there, just to change gears a little bit, are there any specific like regulatory or even safety hurdles that you face when using upcycled ingredients that you might not normally in traditional ingredient sourcing encounter?
Well, I think that I would say that's probably challenge number one, right? How to make it safe for human consumption. So, as I said, the in spent grain, it's a wet, it's wet grain, and so there's a very short window in which you need to dry that grain in order for it to be suitable for human consumption. And I get asked about that a lot, actually. And you know, there are novel processes that many companies have got, but they've got that down. I think they know what they know what they're doing. The other thing is, of course, is heavy metals, any other contaminants. People are very concerned about that, and they're also very concerned about microbial growth. And so when you're using upcycled ingredients, I would say those are the things that you need to, I mean, you would look out for them anyway when you were sourcing an ingredient normally. So for me, I'm like, well, this is a normal sort of sourcing questionnaire that you would have for any standard ingredient, but people are very sensitive to that when you're talking about something that essentially comes from waste.
Anything to add?
Our products don't necessarily spoil. Like we use the aquafaba, which we did make sure that they were a qualified vendor. So they went through the whole bacteria killing process. Other than that, it's like sugar, tapioca syrup, vanilla extract, salt, filtered water. So our product on its own, and it's also kept refrigerated. Most times it's also kept frozen. So there's not really anything in it that would cause bacteria to grow, which has been very helpful. But we are prepared to, like if a retailer does ask us to do an audit, we are prepared to do that because we do have the paperwork from our vendors to provide to them. And then we're also in the middle of switching kitchens, so just making sure that everything is very safety compliant for that as well. But we go through like a cooking process, a whipping process, and then a freezing process.
Fantastic. So I think we're running low on time, so we're going to take a few questions from the audience. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask our panelists?
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much for the information. So in addition to the kind of ad hoc Slack channels where like, hey, I need this ingredient, are you aware of any sort of established marketplace or vendors? Because for our products, I mean, we would love to swap it out. We use a lot of produce, veggies, from regular suppliers to something that could be upcycled or rejected, like the bananas you mentioned. So is there anything out there for us to kind of, tap into outside of just like, hey, does somebody have any garlic?
At the moment, you'll laugh, but that is actually how it goes. Somebody posted a Slack channel and goes, I've got 1,000 pounds of Vocara left. I don't know what to, that's literally how it goes. On an ingredient level, the answer is I don't know, and I thought it was in the process of being developed by someone, but I'm not sure. Marketplace in terms of these kinds of products. The best partner we have had so far is Misfits Market. I don't know whether you're familiar with that. You can. Do you remember Imperfect Foods? It used to be there used to be Imperfect Foods and Misfit Markets, and they joined. And if you want to go anywhere to buy, sustainable food products, clean label, wonky vegetables, that's the place to go. And they've been the best retail partner, I would say, that we have had in the upcycling space. But on an ingredient level, it doesn't exist. You're right.
True.
Are you thinking a new business idea? I can see the cogs churning away.
Well, and this is where you get creative and you go to your local farmers market, get in touch with the farmers, see if they know anyone. Like you start to network through the people that are in your life or the people in your community. But I mean, that's how I found my resources, honestly, is just through people and telling people like, I've been looking for a solution to my problem. Do you know anyone that can help?
Do we need to wrap it up? Is there another question from the audience?
We answered everything? Yes.
Well, I know just
We're
from,
just ace.
No, I'm
just from my own personal experience in reference to your question,
yeah.
you know, it might help to start on a local level because there are certain organizations like in Chicago, there's the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network, right? Where, and they're just, it's working to get, you know, people to collaborate across the industry, and they discover things like that, those gaps where you might find an ingredient that has a surplus. So just, that's just from my own knowledge of the, of the subject matter, but I'm not, you know, one of the experts. So why don't we go around and we can do one key takeaway from each of you about upcycling that you'd like the audience to walk away with today before we finish up. Delisa, go ahead.
One key takeaway. I guess mine would be I'm all about authenticity. So, I mean, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, like around food, just make sure that you go through the process to create that food so it's very, it just aligns with the story that you're trying to create, like the problem that you're trying to solve for yourself, your family, your friends. And then go a little broader, because I know if you kind of start from the top of like, what's sustainability, like what can I solve, it might be very overwhelming because there's a lot of issues out there that you can tackle. But if you do something that's very true to you, your story, your path, the people around you, and then you start to go broader, then I think you'll find your missing piece. So.
I would say there's a lot that we can do to improve the food system, but if you consider food waste, it's the dumbest problem that we've got, right? 38% of all the food made in this country is wasted. That's equivalent to 147 billion meals worth of food. And there are 47 million people who are hungry in the US. So you don't have to be a maths genius to know that the maths isn't mathing. And we need to do, if we're in the food system and we're making ingredients and we're making food, then I believe it's our responsibility to do something different. That means that all food systems in the future should include a minimum of upcycled ingredients. Reduce, reuse, recycle, or upcycle in this case, should become a mantra when it comes to food system design if we're serious about ensuring security of supply for everybody and making it accessible for everybody regardless of the size of your wallet.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time and expertise. Let's give them a hand, please. And thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your show.